This SoonerScoop.com video is streaming in crystal clear 4K resolution on YouTube thanks to Enjoy Vision in Oklahoma City. If you're ready to see the rest of the world just as clearly, get your fresh perspective at Enjoy Vision. Enjoy Vision. This is where Sooner Scoop LASIX.
Hello and welcome back. Eddie Radosovich, George Stoia here from the SoonerScoop.com studios. By the time you're watching this, George will probably not be here. He'll be in Florida, going down to Destin, Florida. The second appearance for you at the SEC spring meetings. And let's start here because there might be a lot of people like, what are you even talking about? What is the spring meetings?
That's a great question. So most conferences, Power 4 conferences, and maybe the smaller ones, but they kind of have these meetings, yearly. But the SEC has them pretty often. This one's kind of the biggest one, especially for football and men's and women's basketball. This is the coaches' meetings as well as the athletic directors' meetings. So, going down there for Oklahoma, it'll be Joe Castiglione, Brent Venables, Porter Moser, and Jenny Baranczyk. This is not something that like Jim Nagy goes to or other GMs. It's just head coaches, athletic directors, and they basically discuss all sorts of stuff. And we'll get into kind of the big storylines, but house settlement will obviously be on there, conference scheduling, calendar dates and things like that, as well as just an opportunity for coaches and athletic directors to voice maybe concerns within the conference or concerns within the NCAA, and for them to figure out a plan to attack those or come up with ideas. And also just for coaches and ADs to kind of meet and talk on the side. Like there's a lot of meetings that are formal and everything. There's also a lot of meetings and dinners that take place, a lot of schmoozing between each other that happens at this too.
Let's get into some of the storylines because I think that, like big picture stuff for the SEC, I think you obviously look at the football side of things. As we get to the end of these first 2 years in the SEC, Oklahoma, with the scheduling, that's going to be a big talking point. And I think you got to start not just with the opponents, but you got to start with what are they going to be? What is the format going to be? 8 games versus 9 games. That's kind of the big discussion right now amongst SEC members.
Yeah, and this has been a discussion that's gone on for the last few years now with the SEC since Oklahoma and Texas joined. And with the college football playoff changing, it's kind of left it in flux. There was a lot of discussion last year about the conference scheduling, and they ended up making the determination of keeping the 8-game conference schedule for last season as well as this coming season, 2025. They have not made a decision on 2026 and beyond. And there's a lot of thought that maybe they could do that at these meetings. I'm told that there probably won't be a decision made by the end of this. Maybe you know which way they're leaning, which I would say right now is 9 conference games, but that all depends on the college football playoff. What has been explained to me is that if this goes to 16 teams, which who knows when that decision would be made, I believe they're hoping to do that sometime maybe this summer, midsummer. If that were to happen, then the conference would want to move to 9 conference games in 2026. So I think that's going to eventually happen. But in terms of this coming week, I don't expect them to actually come to that conclusion just because they're kind of waiting for the College Football Playoff Committee to make that determination in terms of how many teams will be in the playoff.
College Football Playoff did announce the seeding thing. 1 through 12 is going to be a very, 1 through 12 instead of the 4 Power 4 conferences.
Which the SEC wanted. And usually when the SEC wants something,
12, they wanted the 1 through 12.
They wanted the 1 through 12, the new seeding. I think that when the SEC wants something, they get it done. And so that's why, if they want this 16-team format, which they do, as well as the Big Ten, because they can get 4 automatic qualifiers. The Big Ten would get 4, Big 12 2, ACC 2, and then 1 group of 5. That would make a lot of sense that it would happen, this summer, get approved, and then the SEC would come out and say, hey, we're going to go to 9 conference schedule. What that looks like we can get into as well. The pod system,
right?
That's been a big discussion, Eddie. If they were to go to 9, it would be a situation where Oklahoma would have 3 permanent opponents that they would play every single year. Texas would be included in that group. And from my understanding, OU and other schools don't know who the other 2 would be.
I think when the pod discussion was beginning at, even before the first SEC slate was put out there for Oklahoma, it was always kind of connected. Well, maybe it'd be Missouri with the Big 8 ties.
Yep.
You get maybe a quote unquote rivalry game outside of the Texas game, obviously. I know I'm just talking to people out of Baton Rouge. They've always been kind of keen to the idea of OU LSU being that annual post-Thanksgiving game possibly.
Yeah, I mean, that would be, if that's my gut feeling, is that it would be those three. But OU has been told that throw that out the window, basically. The expectation is that it could be something entirely different than what the original plan was going to be, which the original plan was Texas, Missouri, and LSU. And it still could be that.
Sure.
But I think there's a lot going into this. They want to make it an NFL-esque model where you have the NFL where they have your division opponents every year, and then your other 6 opponents, in this case, would be basically based on the previous season and analytics to make sure that the schedules are equal, among conference members. So what that looks like, I don't know, as well as the 3 permanent opponents. There was some thought of make it geographical. Now it sounds like that's kind of been thrown out the window. It's not just about geography. There's other aspects that are going to be put into that. So I don't think they've made that final determination. We may not find that out till later this summer, but I wouldn't be shocked if that is also something that is discussed this week down in Destin.
If they don't make a decision on that, it does seem like one of the big talking points that's going to also kind of be on the forefront of the spring meetings down in Destin, Florida, will be that of the football calendar. And if you talk to any football coach right now, regardless of probably what division they're in, whether it be Division 1, 2, or 3, it seems like everybody agrees something needs to happen. We've talked about the spring portal. Was this the final spring portal? I know that we talked about that on some of the portal shows. It seems like everybody's kind of in agreement on that, which doesn't happen very often in college athletics.
I think this is going to be one of the major talking points that maybe doesn't get talked enough about this week, because everybody's going to be asking these guys about the house settlement, and we'll get to that, and NIL and all that stuff. But this is something, the football calendar, that my understanding the football coaches really want to discuss down in Destin, and they want to talk about getting rid of the spring portal or having new sort of regulations on it.
Sure.
Possibly moving signing day, which we've seen in the past. That is something that they would like to change. Recruiting windows, when they can be on the road, when they cannot be on the road. Summer camps, practices, when practice can start for fall camp, when they have practices for spring practice. Do they move it to an OTA model? I think there's a chance coming out of this meeting, the SEC unifies and says, this is what we envision college football looking like for the calendar in the future. This is what we want to do. The way this works, though, obviously that wouldn't be approved at SEC meetings. This has to go through the NCAA, an entire another process. They need to get the Big Ten on the same page, Big 12, ACC. They all got to be on the same page. But the SEC is usually at the forefront of these things. So I wouldn't be shocked if they come out of these meetings and say, hey, here's what we envision it looking like, and they're going to present that, to the legislative board, whoever it is at the NCAA, the committee there for review. It's
something that I do believe is going to have action upon it.
Yep.
And I think that everybody would agree that the calendar needs something. I know that Brent Venables has talked about it. You put a microphone in a coach's face. They've talked about their displeasure with the current schedule that's out there right now, because it is kind of insane that these guys go from basically the season and you roll right into recruiting, making in-home visits as soon as your season basically gets over. December portal, and then you all of a sudden you maybe take a deep breath in January, but then you're back at it. Your spring ball, and then everything that comes with the spring portal and everything.
It's crazy, and that's from my understanding too. A lot of the football coaches, they want to totally get rid of the spring portal, and I think that will be kind of the leading thing on this review or whatever they submit, is trying to get rid of the spring transfer portal, and also changing what spring practice looks like, and possibly moving some of those dates around. So again, when they submit something like this, not everything on that will probably get approved. It might take some time, but I think the spring transfer portal is certainly something that they're going to push to get rid of.
We discussed it on the Around the Quarter this week. You can see that here on the SoonerScoop.com YouTube channel, but a lot of people are starting to make plans for getting to Norman or taking one of the away game visits that Oklahoma has on the schedule, a big trip to Knoxville, Tuscaloosa next season, kickoff times.
Yep.
And we will get kickoff times coming up next week, May 29th. ESPN and ABC will announce their, kind of their format or the kickoff times for what's to come. OU Texas has been a big talking point, obviously, last year moving to the 2:30 kickoff, which I actually think ended up being okay.
Yeah.
I think we were both pro 11
Would have been an
a.m.
ass kicking either way.
Well, yeah, it didn't matter what time they were playing the game,
I
but
did miss having a beer, at 9 a.m.
well, that
you know.
he might have a problem. But it does seem like 2:30 is that going to be kind of a staple for OU Texas? I know Greg Sankey had talked about it at OU Texas a year ago and said that this kind of works out for everybody.
Yeah, I think that they, the schedule makers at the SEC know what OU Texas is, and they kind of want to plan that to be kind of the marquee game every year. So I do expect that, you mentioned May 29th. That's when we'll kind of find out the windows, which, if you remember last year, the way they do it in the SEC is they kind of give you, okay, it's going to be either an afternoon or night kick between these
2:30 or
times.
6:30,
right?
11 or 2:30. You had a couple of wars. It's like a Lincoln Riley depth chart,
which help you out. I expect those to come out on May 29th. But if the OU Texas one, I think it could come out sooner. Okay. If you remember back to Destin last year, they actually leaked that out on purpose a couple days before they did the full schedule release because they wanted the buzz of OU Texas. I don't know if they'll do that this year because they've, OU and Texas have now been in the league for a year. But I do expect us to find out the kickoff time next week for OU Texas. I do think it'll be 2:30. I also think we're going to find out the time for the Michigan game. And I know we've talked about that on Around the Corner on Friday as well. That's going to be a night kick, and at least that's the expectation. Is it's going to be a night kickoff on ABC, and probably College Game Day. I would assume.
I think so. You look at the week 2 schedule, and you kind of get out of the gates really good. And week 2's always kind of been that week where it's like, well, you kind of had the excitement that came with week 1 and the great matchups, and then everybody jumps in to non-conference schedules, and you have your directional states come to town. It should be a premier game with OU and Michigan tangling.
And I don't know, do we have like the other non-conference kickoff times? I don't think we do.
I don't believe so. No.
I think we'll find
Illinois State and Temple.
I think we'll find those out. And Kent State.
And Kent State. Yeah. We always forget about Kent State, but how dare we? The Racers. We love them. No, we don't. We don't really care about Kent State. House settlement. I know that this has been a talking point. I think that I've taken my approach to the House settlement news, and we've talked about this on the Unofficial 40 with Carrie Burdock. I've taken the approach of basically this is like call it a conference realignment to me.
Yeah.
Let me know what happens when you make a decision and what you're going to go with. That's when I'll start making note of it.
Well, and what's really interesting about this down at spring meetings, because I'm very much in the same boat. I won't be going down to Destin asking a ton of house settlement question. I'll leave that up to Pete Thamel and the Ross Dellingers of the world. But what interests me about it is it could go down next week. Like there is an expectation that maybe the settlement is decided sometime next week, which would make spring meetings extremely interesting to get Greg Sankey's thoughts as well as all the athletic directors and coaches down there. But from an OU perspective, talking to Joe Castiglione down there, they just had layoffs just last week in terms of having to cut. I think it was 5% of their athletic department staff because of the future revenue sharing and all that goes into that. I think getting his perspective on just the future of things at OU and where they are financially will be interesting. But in terms of the ins and outs of the House settlement, I will also be, kind of just waiting and seeing, and, let's just see what this looks like. I do think it'll be interesting. I know coming out of the ACC spring meetings just a week ago, the clearinghouse, the people that would be running that were at that meeting and kind of telling the folks down there, hey, 70% of the NIL deals that you guys did would not pass, in this new format. So I wonder if that same committee will be speaking down in Destin to the SEC folks, and maybe I'll get to talk to them and see kind of what, the future of NIL and deals like that would look like if the House settlement were to pass, as well as roster limits. I'm sure a lot of coaches, when they get asked about the House settlement, will talk about what do the roster limits look like.
And perhaps you'll have that chance because last but not least, and maybe this is the biggest storyline of them all, you'll have a chance to talk to Brent Venables while you're down there. You'll have a chance to talk to Porter Moser, Ginny Baranchek as well. There's a lot of questions to be asked right now of the football program, just in the instance of like a great example. Jaden Gibson, how's his recovery coming? Yeah. That was something that, we talked to Brent Venables twice during the spring at the beginning and then at the end. It just, because he didn't participate in spring ball, we had never had the opportunity to really talk about Jaden.
Yeah, that's kind of my number one question. And it's funny because that's maybe my number one question to go down there and he'll probably give me, a 15-second answer on it. But I think that's the part that is going to be really interesting. There's so much talk that's going to happen down in Destin about the House settlement, future of college football. What do the schedules look like? The calendar, conference scheduling, like that's all important. But there's so many questions to ask Brent about just this football team and getting kind of, the nuts and bolts of what's going to happen this next year. ESPN just released their advanced analytics SP Plus about OU having the toughest schedule in the country next year, which we kind of already knew, but
Sure.
To see it on paper, it really means something. Asking him about that, as well as injuries, John Mateer and his growth, Giovanni Gibson, which I don't feel like we kind of got a little update at the end of spring. Where is he at now in his progress? The spring transfers they added, we haven't got to talk to him about, guys like Jaden Ott that could be a big difference maker next year. So I think all of those questions, getting to spend some time with Brent, will be really good. And the cool thing about spring meetings is there's not a ton of media down there. And most of the media that are down there are national. And so they're going to get their national questions in. But in terms of local media and asking team-specific questions, I think I'll be able to get quite a few answers.
Should be good. And that's one of the perks of having George down in Destin, Florida for the spring meetings coming up at the beginning of this week. And we'll probably try to catch up with you here as you talk to Brent Venables.
I'll be zooming in.
Or some of the basketball coaches, Porter Bozer, obviously, the excitement, it seems like, around the program.
Haven't talked to him
the
since.
Positivity around the program since they added their transfer portal haul over the course of, I guess that would have been April, if you will. But should be interesting. And then obviously Jitty Bronchek and crew with the number one player in the country coming in. It seems like the expectations for that thing
and they didn't do anything in the portal.
Could be, which may be a little bit surprising.
Yeah, and I think I'll definitely be asking her about that. So kind of where she thinks their roster is right now. You love it, but you're a little interested why they didn't add anybody in the transfer portal.
No doubt. George Stoia will be down in Florida, and we will catch up with him right here on the SoonerScoop.com YouTube channel. So that is it. That's a little bit of a preview of what's to come at the beginning of this week with the SEC spring meetings. For George Stoia, I'm Eddie Radosevich. We'll talk to you next time.